Yeah, this Tomlin thing, I think it's awesome because, again, and if he ever makes a perfunctory denial about a rumor in the future, it's going to be like, hey, I'm not so sure about this one because he went all out on USC. We see what it's like when there is something that truly has no truth to it. And I respect the fact that he shut it down and he shouted it down, and he's not going to play some leverage game to get a raise out of the Roonies. He's never going to college. There isn't a check big enough that a booster can write. I just love that.
Oh, he was great, Mike, and that's the way to do it, certainly. Now, I'll add two things to this. One, he should have been asked this because Carson Palmer, who's involved in the search, brought up his name. It's not like they made this up and just said, hey, maybe you'll go to USC because you're on the verge of missing the playoffs for the third time in 4 years, and maybe the Steelers will be looking for a chance. I mean, they didn't ask any of that. His name came up in the search. That's number one. And number two, yes, frankly, Sean Payton has been asked about the USC job. 2015, his name, and also that Pete Carroll was mentioned in the USC job in 2015. They both had to deny that they were interested in the USC job. Of course, neither one went, and now here we are again with USC changing coaches, and now it's Mike Tomlin's name attached to the thing. But if I'm a reporter in Pittsburgh, I'm also scared to ask him ever again about a coaching search, Mike.
But they are doing their jobs. They have to ask him.
Yep.
Judge for yourself. Here's Carson Palmer from yesterday's Dan Patrick show putting Mike Tomlin's black and gold hat into the USC ring. Here he is.
You can't have a lot of front runners, Carson. You can have a front runner.
You've got Penn State, you've got Iowa State, you've got Cincinnati, you've got a wild card like Mike Tomlin. That if Mike Tomlin wants out, I think, at the end of the day, there is not a direct, that's the guy everybody's pointing their fingers at.
Hey, and by the way, people give me a hard time when I do Zoom from my basement and they say it's like a Game of Thrones set. I don't want to hear that again after seeing the Carson Palmer background. That's ultra next level. That is crazy. I'm waiting for a dragon to show up and turn him into French fries. But, look, there it is. It's awesome. I love it. I mean, you can't hide money, as Chris Sims would say. But regardless, Tomlin's name was out there. He had to be asked the question. And you mentioned Sean Payton. He was, for one period of time, hounded relentlessly every year. He was linked to some sort of speculation about leaving the Saints. I mean, whether it's linking a guy to USC, linking a guy to another NFL job, anything like that creates something he gets asked about and becomes an irritant. I got the term Sunday splash reports from Payton because that's how he would dismiss the rumors linking him to other teams. I've seen people try to suggest that other coaches don't go through this, and there's this subtle suggestion that there's a racial component to it. Folks, look, there are plenty of horrible racist things that are done and said. But Mike Tomlin being asked about the USC job and this suggestion that, like, white coaches aren't asked those questions, I'm not going there. I will not go there. That's a bridge too far for me when it comes to finding potential racial bias in things. Because there's no difference between Mike Tomlin, Sean Payton. John Harbaugh got asked about Michigan after he won a Super Bowl. Before they hired Jim, John's name reportedly was at the top of the list, and he got asked about it. And you know what? If Andy Reid didn't have Patrick Mahomes, and if he wasn't in his early 60s, maybe his name would come up for another job. The bottom line is USC is going big name hunting, and they may be able to put together a package that would compare favorably to what the Roonies pay Mike Tomlin. I don't know. I don't know how big the check would be, but maybe there is a check out there that's big enough to get someone's attention. Mike Tomlin just happened to be the first name that came up, and I have a feeling he won't be the last. Hell, when Jeff Fisher was in the NFL, and he went to a Super Bowl. I know people like to clown Jeff Fisher because he was, Mr. 7-9. He's coached a hell of a lot of games. He's won a hell of a lot of games. He was linked to USC in the past as well. Now he went there. There's a more of an obvious connection, but still, I don't think it's an insult. If anything, it's positive. It's an irritant. You got to deal with it, but it's good to have your name come up for these other jobs. There are plenty of NFL coaches whose names aren't coming up for any jobs anywhere. Nick Sirianni ain't coming up for a job anywhere right now, all due respect to Nick. There are plenty of coaches, and I don't want to keep naming names and pissing people off, but your name only comes up for a job that they're trying to make a big job if it's a big name. It's more of a compliment than an insult. That's my point.
Yeah, and Joe Brady last week was asked about the LSU job, Mike. Obvious connection there with Joe Brady having won the national championship when he was calling that offense.
Joe Brady may get fired the way things are going in Carolina, but I get your point.
Yeah, but, I do think it's a compliment, and we're going to talk about the Rooney Rule shortly and what they've done in the NFL. I think it's great that they're looking at minority candidates in colleges and elsewhere, and I hope they do it more in the NFL because that's something that hasn't happened. So I think it's a compliment. I think it's a compliment to Mike Tomlin. Now, back to the original point, I think he handled it well. I don't think he's going to be asked about it again, and I got the feeling that he is not going to any college job, and why would you, frankly? To me, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the safest, best NFL job, probably the best job in pro sports. I mean, there's so much security there. The Steelers don't fire coaches. He's had success there, never had a losing record. This might be the first one, but never had a losing record. They're not going to fire Mike Tomlin at the end of the year, even if he misses the playoffs for the third time in 4 years. Even if he hasn't won a Super Bowl since his second season, we know that. They are going to stick with Mike Tomlin. And you know what? If they got rid of Mike Tomlin, he'd have a job within a few days. There'd be several teams in the NFL that would be interested in Mike Tomlin.
And the bottom line is what Tomlin said was far more convincing than one of the all-time great non-denial denials that we heard from Nick Saban late December of 2006. Let's just have a trip down memory lane for old time's sake.
I've said it 3 different occasions. Well, then I guess I have to say it. I'm not going to be the Alabama coach. I think I've said this over and over and over again.
Yeah, and 2 weeks later he was the Alabama coach. I'll say this, though, about the Steelers. They don't pay top of the market. And we don't know how much the highest paid coaches are making because the teams have a way of using shell companies to funnel extra money that there's never any record of at the league office. You think, oh, here comes Conspiracy Mike, and please don't put up the photo. It's true. It happens. They don't know how much the highest paid coaches are making because that prevents the tide from rising for the guys who aren't the highest paid. So if Bill Belichick's officially making 15, there's another 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 maybe floating around that's being funneled to him. Same thing with Sean Payton, same thing with Sean McVay, same thing with Pete Carroll. They get money delivered to them other ways. My point is this. The Steelers are never going to be in that range. And I remember when Bill Cowher resigned after the 2006 season, opening the door for Mike Tomlin. I remember thinking, look, he had just beaten Mike Holmgren in a Super Bowl. Holmgren was making about $8.5 million a year at the time. Cowher's making about $5 million. The Rooneys are never paying more than that, in relation to growth. I mean, it's grown since then, but they're never going top of the market. I remember believing when Cowher first resigned, he was going to take a few years off and then come back and make a hell of a lot more, make top of the market, and make up all the money that he would have made if he would have kept coaching the Steelers in between and then some. He just ultimately decided that he liked that seat at the NFL today. It's an easier life than hanging on wins and losses, and he never left it, and he never will. But, there was a time after a few years he considered the Jets job, and if they would have fired Mike Tannenbaum at the time, I think Cowher would have taken the job. He wanted to have his own table setter. So, my point is this. Mike Tomlin has been there since 2007. Maybe there's at some point another NFL job where the owner would pay him a hell of a lot more than what he's making now. I think that's a far greater possibility than ever going to any college job, especially after what he said today, Charean.
And I tell you what, I would rather coach in the NFL than in college because you don't have to recruit. To me, recruiting would be a pain in the butt. But college coaches are very well paid. I went to A&M, and we just paid Clarksburg, West Virginia native $90 million guarantee. He is making $9 million a year, Mike, and has $90 million guaranteed in his contract. So coaches in college are well paid for what they get. If you think they're not, they are. So they can get paid in college, they can get paid in the pros, but there probably is a booster who would write a blank check to Mike Tomlin worth well more than he's making with the Steelers, I would imagine.
And it's a lot easier to pay college coaches a lot of money when you are exploiting your labor pool and the players aren't getting a penny. And you know what? Maybe philosophically he's not interested in coaching at that level where the players aren't fairly compensated for their efforts. I know the name, image, and likeness exception has created a path for some to make money, but none of that money's coming from the programs. None of it, not a penny.
Right.
They found a way to get somebody else to do what they should do, which is pay the players. And maybe Mike Tomlin wants nothing to do with that, but he's not going to come out and say it because NFL coaches like to tiptoe around the free farm system known as college football.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.